Tom Matthews had imagined this move 100 different ways. New beginnings, garden weekends, maybe even neighborhood BBQs. What he hadn't imagined was that his dream home would come with a nightmare in the shape of a neighbor. The house was perfect, a cozy single story with a sprawling backyard, nestled in a quiet cul-de-sac in the Cedar Trails HOA. After decades in the city, Tom and his wife Lena were finally getting the peace they'd earned. Their first project? Installing a clean 6-foot cedar privacy fence to separate their property from the house next door. They thought it would bring comfort. It brought Karen. Karen Whitmore lived in the tan-bricked house to the left, identical in build, but worlds apart in atmosphere. Tom first saw her the day the fencing crew arrived. She stood on her porch, arms crossed, squinting into the morning sun like she was trying to see through their souls. He waved. She didn't wave back. By the second day, the crew lead approached Tom with an odd request. "Your neighbor asked us to stop hammering until after 10 a.m., says she has migraines. She'll have to take a Tylenol," Tom said with a smile, brushing it off. The fence was completed by the weekend. It was neat, well-crafted, and within HOA guidelines, checked twice in fact. It gave their backyard a private, almost serene feel. That night, Tom and Lena toasted their move with wine on the patio. For the first time in years, they felt completely at home. Until Lena stepped on something. A folded note. No envelope. No stamp. Just a single line, written in perfectly even block letters. Some things aren't worth hiding behind. They both stared at it in silence. Lena blinked. "Did you write this?" Tom shook his head slowly. "Nope. And I think we both know who did." Across the fence, motion sensor lights flickered on. In the brief wash of light, they caught a glimpse of Karen standing by her window, arms crossed, unmoving, watching. Over the next few days, small annoyances began stacking like bricks. First came the HOA citations. Violation: Rosa 12, lawn height, exceeds 3.5 inches. Violation: Jurors 79, unapproved outdoor decor, wind chimes. Violation: Jurors 141, fence height under review, pending review of natural lighting impact. Tom read them with a growing sense of disbelief. 3 notices in 5 days, each one more ridiculous than the last. He tried to keep cool. "Let it go," Lena said, massaging his shoulders. "She's just testing us." Still, he couldn't help but notice the way Karen would linger near. The property line, trimming her already perfect hedges while staring at the fence like it had personally insulted her. Then came the sprinkler incident. One afternoon, Tom walked into the backyard to find their sprinkler had been turned, now spraying, directly into Karen's yard. A garden stake with a smiling gnome had been broken in half near the fence. That evening, Tom knocked on Karen's door. She answered after a full minute, eyes blank. "Hi, Karen. I think there was some kind of mix-up with our sprinkler. Did you—" "Did I what?" she interrupted sharply. "Invade your yard? Tamper with your property? Sounds like projection, neighbor." Tom blinked, taken aback. "I was just—" "You should take better care of your lawn," she said, and shut the door. That night. Tom stood at the fence and looked up at the stars. The air was quiet, almost too quiet. A breeze blew softly, rustling the newly laid grass. From across the fence, something flickered in the dark, the scent of smoke, just for a second. Then it was gone. He turned, scanning the yard, but saw nothing. Just shadows. Still, a tightness formed in his chest that didn't leave for hours. Something wasn't right. And it was only beginning. Tom didn't want to believe it at first. He'd seen enough online horror stories about nightmare neighbors, especially ones with HOA power trips, but he'd figured those were the exception, not the rule. Karen, however, was proving him wrong, one passive-aggressive jab at a time. The next morning, a fresh violation slip was tacked to the edge of his mailbox. Violation Androzo 2-4. Fence color, not consistent with community aesthetic. Attached was a blurry photo, his fence, looking exactly as it had before. Lena stared at it. She's trying to bury us in paperwork. Is this real life? Tom exhaled slowly, rubbing his temple. No, it's Karen life. But it wasn't just citations anymore. Subtle, unsettling things started happening around the house. Always, just on the edge of plausible deniability, the solar garden lights they installed were ripped out overnight. Tom found them lying scattered in a line along the fence. The stakes snapped. No animal could have done it that cleanly. A week later, Lena's favorite rose bushes, the ones she'd planted in front of the patio, wilted overnight. Every bloom sagged, their leaves spotted with a strange, dark residue. It smells like oil, Lena said, crouching down and inspecting the soil. Did she actually pour something into the dirt? Tom kneeled beside her and dipped a finger into the earth. It was greasy. I don't have proof, he muttered, but this isn't nature. He installed a motion sensor light over the backyard that afternoon. Just a deterrent, he told himself. Nothing more. But that night, the light blinked on 3 times in under an hour. Each time Tom looked out the window, he saw nothing. Just the sway of trees, the stillness of a suburban night. The next day, the light was shattered. Not ripped. Out, shattered. Pieces of the bulb lay beneath the porch, as though something had been thrown at it from the other side of the fence. Tom stormed over to the HOA office the following morning. This is harassment, he told the manager, a thin man named Craig, who reeked of cheap cologne and apathy. Our property is being damaged. My wife's plants were poisoned. This woman is sabotaging our yard. Craig looked up from his computer, uninterested. Do you have visual proof of Karen committing these actions? No, but... Then, unfortunately, Craig cut in, it's just hearsay, and we try to remain neutral in neighbor disputes unless there's concrete evidence. Tom clenched his jaw. But she keeps filing fake reports against us. Craig shrugged. Anyone can submit violations. We're obligated to document and investigate. Tom left fuming, his blood boiling in a way it hadn't since his corporate days. But it wasn't just HOA politics. It was the way Craig had leaned back in his chair and said Karen's name, like they were old buddies, like she wasn't just some random neighbor but someone with pull. When he got home, Lena met him at the door. She didn't say anything, just handed him another note. No envelope, no signature. You don't belong here. Sell before it gets worse. That night, Tom stood on the patio again. The moon was full, casting silvery light across the yard. He glanced toward the fence, toward Karen's side. Her back window was lit, curtains drawn just wide enough to see her figure inside, standing, still, staring. Tom stared back, and that's when he saw it. Just for a second, a small red gas canister sitting near her garden shed. His breath caught. Was it a warning or a promise? One thing was becoming clear. This wasn't about a fence. This was about control, and Karen wasn't planning to lose. 2 days later, Tom woke to the scent of something faint and bitter wafting through the bedroom window. Burnt plastic? It was subtle but distinct. He sat up, sniffed the air again, and got dressed. In the backyard, dawn was just starting to stretch across the grass. Dew shimmered on the blades, except for one odd patch about 5 feet from the fence. The grass there was brown, crisp at the edges, and in a strange, perfect semicircle. Tom crouched down, touched it, dry, charred. He followed the pattern toward the fence and found something else, his garden hose, slashed clean in half. The cut wasn't from wear or weather, it was deliberate, precise. He called Lena over. This is getting out of hand, she said, eyes wide. We need cameras, real ones. Tom nodded. And maybe a restraining order. They bought 2 weatherproof security cameras that afternoon and mounted them discreetly, one aimed at the backyard, the other catching the space between the side gate and the garage. Tom also left a note with their next-door neighbor on the other side, asking if they'd seen or heard anything unusual. That night, they went to bed uneasy. Nothing about their home felt safe anymore. The next morning, Tom reviewed the footage. Nothing. Hours of quiet. Trees swaying. A stray cat wandering the fence. But no Karen. No gas can. No figures creeping through the dark. It was as if the sabotage had stopped the second they hit record. Except, when Tom walked outside, another surprise waited for him. The garden gnome Lena had glued back together earlier that week had been smashed again, not knocked over, smashed. Its ceramic head was lying in their bird bath. No footage, no sound. No clue how it happened. He was beginning to understand. Karen wasn't just petty, she was calculated, careful, a silent stalker who knew exactly how to keep her fingerprints off everything. Later that day, Tom received a call from the HOA. "Hi, Mr. Matthews," said Craig's nasal voice. "We've received another complaint. This one's more serious." Tom's stomach dropped. "From Karen?" "I'm not at liberty to say, but it involves your use of flammable materials near the property line." "What?" Craig continued flatly. "A neighbor reported seeing a container and matches near your fence, suggesting a potential attempt at a controlled burn." Tom almost laughed. "Are you joking? Karen's the one with a gas can sitting next to her shed?" "There's no official report of that. We'd advise you not to engage in any landscaping. That could present a fire hazard." He hung up. It was surreal. Karen was playing offense. She wasn't just trying to force them out, she was preemptively framing them. Tom spent the rest of the day combing the fence line, checking every inch for any new damage. That's when he found the most disturbing clue yet. A used matchbook. It was tucked under a flower pot near the fence, partially soaked by dew, but clearly marked with black soot at the tips. 5 matches gone, 3 bent. On the back, the logo of a local gas station. It wasn't his. Neither he nor Lena smoked. Tom picked it up with a plastic bag and placed it in a Ziploc, just in case. He looked at the fence, then over the fence. Karen's curtains twitched. That night, Tom set an alarm for every 2 hours. He watched the cameras live from his phone, even walked the yard once with a flashlight, and at 1:43 a.m., something moved. Just a blur, a flash of red near the gate. But when he replayed the camera, there was nothing. He stared at the feed, heart pounding, then leaned back and whispered to himself, "She's not done." And he was right. Because the fire was coming. It started with light, an unnatural flicker against the walls, jerking Tom out of a restless sleep. At first, he thought it was a dream. Then he heard Lena scream, "Tom, the yard!" He bolted upright and ran to the window. Outside, fire clawed its way up the fence like something alive. The cedar wood caught fast, flames curling higher with every second. Orange and yellow licked the sky as smoke billowed into the air. Tom grabbed his phone and hit 911. "Yes, it's a fire. Our backyard. The fence is burning. We're at 47 Silver Pine Drive. Just send someone." He rushed outside barefoot, yanking the garden hose, only to remember the line had been cut days ago. The water never came. Lena stood back near the patio door, wrapped in a robe, her face pale and lit by the glow of the blaze. "Tom, it's spreading!" The fire was chewing through the fence, ash and sparks drifting onto their new patio furniture. The dry grass nearby hissed as heat kissed it, threatening to catch. Tom grabbed a bucket and sprinted to the kitchen tap. He filled it, dumped it, ran again, fighting a battle that buckets couldn't win. And just as panic began to rise in his chest, red and white lights painted the street. Sirens pierced the air. Firefighters swarmed the scene, cutting through the smoke and tearing down sections of the burning fence to stop the spread. Within minutes, the fire was out. But the damage was done. Half the fence had been reduced to blackened timber. The yard reeked of scorched wood and melted plastic. Smoke still curled in lazy lines into the sky. Tom stood there, soaked in sweat, his hands shaking. Then came the worst part. By sunrise, the fire marshal had arrived. Stern, clipboard in hand, he asked questions in a clipped tone. Any flammable items nearby? Had they done any recent burning? Stored gas? Tom explained everything about Karen, the threats, the matchbook, the cut hose, the broken lights, the notes, the citations. The marshal frowned. Did you report any of this? To the HOA. They did nothing. I installed cameras, but... Tom hesitated. Last night, they didn't catch anything. I swear someone was there. I saw movement, but the footage shows nothing. The marshal scribbled something down, then paused. Someone already submitted. A statement, your neighbor, she says she saw you near the fence yesterday with a lighter. Tom blinked. What? That's a lie. I wasn't even... She also claimed you've been landscaping near the fence with open flames, and that you mentioned burning away the problem. Tom couldn't believe what he was hearing. Lena stepped in, voice rising. That's insane. She's the one with a gas can. She's been harassing us since we moved in. The marshal sighed. Look, we'll investigate. But without clear footage or witnesses, it's her word against yours. It's possible this was an accident. Dry. Grass, a stray spark, but for now, I'm filing it as suspected controlled burn. Tom felt the words punch him in the gut. You're saying I started it? I'm saying we don't have a conclusive cause. By that afternoon, the HOA issued a temporary notice. All fire-related activity was banned until further notice. Tom received an official warning in his mailbox. And Karen? She sat on her porch with a cup of tea, sunglasses on, a smirk playing across her lips. When Tom stepped outside, she raised her mug in a mock toast. Careful, neighbor, she called out sweetly. Wouldn't want anything else to go up in flames. Tom stood frozen, every nerve in his body buzzing. She'd done it. She'd burned his yard, and somehow made it look like he did. But he was done playing defense. It was time to expose her. Tom was done waiting. Karen had declared war, and now she was rewriting the narrative with HOA citations, false witness statements, and literal fire. No more defense, no more polite neighborly restraint. It was time to flip the script. He started with the matchbook. Tom returned to the gas station printed on the back and asked to speak with the manager. After some explaining and a promise to show authorities if needed, the manager agreed to pull up security footage from the past week. There, clear as day, was Karen Whitmore. Wearing a wide sun hat and sunglasses, she stood at the checkout counter, buying a matchbook and a bottle of lighter fluid. The time stamp? 2 days before the fire. Tom snapped a photo of the screen with the manager's permission. Evidence. Finally, he took it straight to the HOA office. Craig, still reeking of cologne and ambivalence, barely looked up from his keyboard. I need this filed immediately, Tom said, placing the image on the desk. Karen bought lighter fluid and matches 2 days before the fire she claimed I started. Craig sighed. That could be for household use. Fire pits, barbecues. She doesn't even own a grill, Tom snapped. And she's been harassing us for weeks. I've got notes, broken property, sabotage, and now this. Craig gave a bored shrug. I'll pass it on to the board. That's not good enough anymore. I'm taking this to the fire marshal. And if I don't see some real action soon, I'm contacting a lawyer. That made Craig flinch. Slightly. Fine. I'll make sure this is added to the ongoing investigation. But I hope you understand these things take time. Tom left, jaw tight, fists clenched. He didn't have time. Karen was winning. Every day she twisted reality, stacking the deck against him. That night, Lena had a different idea. "We need to beat her at her own game," she said, sitting across from him at the kitchen table. "She's sneaky, manipulative, and careful, but people like her always slip. We just need the right bait." Tom raised an eyebrow. "Bait? I think it's time we give her the perfect opportunity and watch her take it." The plan was simple. Install a brand new camera, hidden this time, and set a trap. They staged a cleanup day in the backyard, placing a small bag of mulch and a bottle of weed killer near the fence. Nothing illegal, but just suspicious-looking enough. That evening, Tom left the back porch light on and went to bed at his usual time. But the camera was rolling. It had night vision, cloud backup, and was carefully tucked behind a decorative rock in the garden bed. And at 2:17 a.m., Karen struck. The camera caught her crouching near the fence, reaching over with gloves on and snatching the weed killer bottle. She then poured something, presumably from her side, onto the bag of mulch, then quickly disappeared into the shadows. The next morning, the mulch was scorched. A small, dark circle smoldered in the grass, just like before. But this time, Tom had her. He sent the footage to the fire marshal's office, attached the gas station photo, and CC'd the HOA board for good measure. And by that afternoon, the call came. "Mr. Matthews," the marshal said, "thank you for this. We'll be paying Ms. Whitmore a visit today." Tom smiled for the first time in days. "Let me know if she needs help finding the footage. I've got plenty of copies." Across the fence, Karen watered her roses, oblivious. But the tide had turned. The fire was hers now, and soon, so would the consequences. The fire marshal didn't knock, he pounded, loud enough for Tom and Lena to hear it from across the yard. They rushed to the window, coffee forgotten on the kitchen counter. Two officials stood on Karen's porch, clipboard in hand, speaking firmly. She opened the door like a woman expecting royalty. But when she saw their uniforms, the smile dropped from her face like a brick in water. She crossed her arms defensively. 15 minutes passed. She stepped outside twice, pointing toward Tom's house, then gestured animatedly at the fence. Her voice, usually cold and clipped, rose with shrill indignation. But the officials remained calm, unmoved. Then one of them handed her a paper. She snatched it like it had stung her fingers. She slammed the door behind her. Tom stood frozen. "Think they're actually pressing charges?" Lena gave a small, fierce grin. "At the very least, they're not buying her innocent act anymore." Later that afternoon, Craig from the HOA, looking considerably less smug, called Tom. "Mr. Matthews, I wanted to inform you the board is placing a temporary restriction on Ms. Whitmore's access to HOA violation submissions pending the investigation. It appears she's been filing an abnormally high number of complaints. Some unfounded." Tom raised an eyebrow. "You mean false?" "Well, let's just say there's an internal audit underway." Tom leaned back in his chair, a quiet satisfaction blooming in his chest. Glad to hear it, but the victory was short-lived. That evening, someone keyed his truck, deep, deliberate scratches, 3 of them, across the driver's side door. Red paint chipped. No note, no witnesses. But the message was clear. Tom stood there, fists balled. Lena joined him, staring at the damage. "She's unraveling. She knows she's cornered," Tom said. "She's getting reckless. They..." Reviewed camera footage. Nothing. The car was parked just outside the camera's range. But Karen had been outside on her porch just minutes before it happened, talking loudly on her phone about ungrateful neighbors and dangerous people who need to leave. The next morning, Tom filed a police report. No direct evidence. Tied her to the act, but the officer made a note of the growing record. "She's got a pattern," the officer said. "If she keeps escalating, we'll be in a better position to act next time." Still, the tension coiled tighter. Tom and Lena couldn't enjoy their home anymore. Even watering the plants felt like moving through a battlefield, always glancing, over their shoulder, always expecting another twist. Then, the break came. Tom's neighbor, Mr. Alvarez, the quiet elderly man on the opposite side, knocked on his door with a flash drive. "I didn't want to get involved," he said, "but I've seen what she's been doing. And last night, well, I figured you should have this." Tom plugged the drive into his laptop. A crystal clear view of Karen's backyard. Her walking to the fence in the dead of night with a canister. Her pouring it, then striking a match. The footage didn't just catch her in the act, it caught her face. It caught her smiling. Tom stared at the screen, barely breathing. "Thank you," he said. "You have no idea what this means." Mr. Alvarez nodded. "Some people get away with too much, too long. She thinks no one sees. But we do." Tom handed the footage to the authorities and copied it to 3 flash drives. This time there would be no loopholes, no denials. And Karen? She didn't. No yet, but her house of cards was about to fall. Hard. Karen's downfall didn't arrive with a bang. It started with a knock. And this time, it was the police. 3 officers. No smiles, no clipboard diplomacy. Tom watched from his porch as they approached Karen's pristine white door with grim determination. She answered wearing a robe and smug annoyance until she saw the uniforms. Her face paled. She stepped out, tried to close the door behind her, but one officer placed his boot in the frame. They spoke calmly. Karen began to raise her voice, again blaming Tom, again gesturing wildly at the fence. Then they showed her the footage. Tom couldn't hear what was said, but he saw it all. Her lips stopped moving. Her jaw dropped just slightly. Her fingers twitched at her sides like she was trying to hold on to her story. But it was too late. One officer read her rights. The other placed her hands behind her back. Handcuffs, Karen Whitmore, queen of HOA complaints and backyard sabotage, was arrested on her perfectly trimmed lawn. Her eyes darted across the street and locked on Tom, pure hate, but underneath it, fear. The neighborhood erupted within hours. People whispered in driveways, pointed at her house, texted friends. One brave neighbor even posted the arrest footage on a local HOA Facebook group. The video of Karen being escorted into a squad car in fuzzy slippers had more than 600 views in 2 hours. Tom didn't post it. He didn't need to. The truth was out, and the truth had a long shadow. 2 days later, the HOA sent an official notice. Ms. Whitmore is suspended indefinitely from all board activities pending criminal proceedings. Her prior citations and complaints are under internal review for fraudulence and harassment. An external mediator will be brought in to reassess property disputes. Craig, in an astonishing act of survival instinct, called Tom personally to apologize. "I misjudged the situation," he stammered. "And the board regrets not addressing the matter more seriously. We'd like to offer assistance with fence repair and a formal letter clearing your name." Tom let the silence stretch, then simply said, "Good." But it wasn't over yet. Karen posted bail and returned home 2 days later. Gone were the staged morning tea sessions, the passive-aggressive yard work, the curated neighborhood greetings. Her porch lights stayed off, her blinds stayed drawn, but she couldn't resist one last move, a note, folded and slipped under Tom's door in the middle of the night. It read, "You don't know what you've started. Watch your back." Tom stared at it for a full minute, then walked calmly to his fire pit. He tossed the paper in, watched it burn. That weekend, the neighborhood threw a community reset BBQ, unofficially known as the Karen is Gone party. Neighbors Tom had barely met before came up to shake his hand, thank him, laugh about how someone had finally stood up to her. "I didn't know how bad it was," one woman said. "She threatened to report my kid's lemonade stand over business licensing." "Last year," said another. She tried to fine us for planting roses without submitting a color palette. Karen watched from her window, but no one waved. That night. Lena curled up next to Tom on the patio, where the new fence now stood, stronger than before. A fresh coat of paint, a new garden gnome, and real peace. "You did it," she said softly. "No," Tom replied. "We did." He took her hand and looked toward the house next door. Empty windows stared back, but he wasn't afraid anymore because the fire Karen started burned her mask away. And now, finally, the smoke was clearing. Weeks passed since Karen's arrest. The neighborhood seemed to breathe easier, the tension fading like smoke after a storm. Tom and Lena settled back into their home, restoring the yard, painting the fence, even planting new flowers along the edge. Life returned to something close to normal. Almost. One afternoon, Tom found a small, plain envelope slipped under the front door. No handwriting, just his name typed on the front. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It read, "You think this is over? Think again? You don't know the half of it." Below the ominous message was a photo, not of Tom or Lena. It was Karen. But the photo was old, years old, and it showed Karen shaking hands with none other than Craig, the HOA manager. Tom stared, heart pounding. How deep did this go? The next day, Tom confronted Craig at the HOA office. "Care to explain this?" Tom asked, sliding the photo across the desk. Craig's face tightened, eyes darting nervously. "That's from a community event 5 years ago," he said quickly. "We're neighbors. It's not unusual." Tom shook his head. "It's more than that. Karen wasn't just a cranky neighbor. She had allies, someone protecting her, maybe even encouraging her." Craig looked away. "Listen, I don't know." "What you're implying?" Tom leaned in. "I'm saying this. The sabotage, the false complaints, the fire. It wasn't just Karen's doing. Someone on the inside made sure she could keep pushing without real consequences. Someone who wanted to control the neighborhood by fear." Craig's jaw clenched. "You're accusing me?" "Not just you," Tom said quietly, "but you're the link." Tom left the office with more questions than answers. That evening, he and Lena sat outside, the sky turning a soft purple. "Why would Craig protect her?" Lena asked. "Power," Tom said grimly. "Control. Maybe Karen was a pawn in a bigger game." Suddenly, Tom's phone buzzed. A new message from an unknown number. "You're digging where you shouldn't. Stop now, or the next fire won't be in your yard." His blood ran cold. The story had changed again. No longer just a neighbor feud or an HOA dispute. Now it was something much darker. Tom realized the fight wasn't just to clear his name anymore. It was to protect his family, his home, and maybe even his life. Days later, the HOA board held an emergency meeting. With mounting evidence against Craig, they voted to suspend him indefinitely pending a full investigation. Rumors spread fast. Craig had resigned under pressure the next day. Tom and Lena finally felt the first true sense of relief. The web of deceit was unraveling. One evening, as Tom trimmed the newly restored fence, Lena pointed toward the other side. A moving van was parked outside Karen's old house. Boxes carried out, gone. Finally, Tom smiled, but deep down, he knew this wasn't just the end of Karen. It was the end of an era of silence, fear, and smoke. Before he went inside, Tom looked up at the sky. The last ember of the fire had long since died, but the memory burned bright, and if anything, it had taught him one thing. Sometimes the fiercest battles are fought not with flames, but with truth, and the courage to face whatever comes next.